the fundamental truth is struggle is good for you, right? The growth is in the struggle. And so when you combine a growth mindset with this idea of a stress is enhancing mindset, and there's peer-reviewed research in the book that people can read about this, is your performance index goes through the roof. One of the things you've got to do around mindset is start to enjoy the effort that you deliver in pursuit of your goals. Every time you make a mistake in life or you have a regret or something doesn't go your way, just like a game that you lose to another opponent, you have to go back and watch the game, right? You have to evaluate, what could I have done differently?
What one key piece of advice would you like to share with all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
Change isn't just possible, it's necessary.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Ethan Cassiotis, and today I have an awesome guest. His name is Michael Lopez, and he is a transformation strategist and consultant and has delivered results for clients across multiple industries and business models. And as a student of the human industry, Michael uses his experience and passion for the science and practice of behavior change to design innovative change strategies. And he brings a diverse leadership style forged from a blend of business, civil service, military, and athletic experience, which he uses to accelerate performance for leaders and teams of all types. And prior to forming Michael J. Lopez Consulting, Michael worked at Profit Brand Strategy. And before this, he spent time as a managing director at both KPMG and EY. And after 13 years with Booz Allen Hamilton. And in addition, Michael spent 2 years as a director of innovation and strategy at Smiths Interconnect, a global diversified industrial products company. And he began his career as an intelligence officer in the US intelligence community. And Michael earned his MBA from George Mason University and his BA from Occidental College. Welcome, Michael Lopez, and thank you for being on the Business Growth Show.
Thank you, Ethan, for having me. It's great to be talking with you across the distance and time zones, and just super honored to be here.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I'm sure it's going to be an awesome show for everyone watching and listening today. And you are a successful entrepreneur. So for those people that don't know who you are, introduce yourself and telling us more about you and your journey.
Yeah, you mentioned my professional background. I spent 2 decades in various forms of big consulting, helping companies of all types try to change in some way, whether it was performance, culture, operations, technology, strategy, and in those experiences, I realized a couple important things. Number one, that many of the strategies that we employ, they just really don't work, and it's not because we don't have good intentions. This community is full of hardworking people doing good work, trying to make the best of what they can to move organizations, but they don't always work because organizations are groups of people, and in the world of change, the unit of measurement is the individual. And so I started to really get curious about the science of what was happening to us at the microscopic level. You mentioned I spent time as an athlete, as a coach, and I would use strategies on the field and with teams, and then we'd show up to work and we'd sort of forget some of the essential elements of the human experience. And so that was the first thing that got me into this path of entrepreneurialism. The second one is really this idea that, I do the work. I'm a practitioner. I live by these same principles. And so in the world of big consulting, I just found that the economic model wasn't really conducive to kind of that high touch experience. So by being on my own, by being a little bit more nimble and flexible, a little bit less overhead and some of that complexity, I could dig in with clients and be in the meetings, be in the conversations, be in the hard moments. I just had lunch with a client today, and we were talking about, that style of kind of working in high leverage moments. And so for me, it was a great way to kind of deliver the strategies that I know really create impact and be able to do it myself. And that keeps me fresh. It allows me to work across industries and work with different styles. And, I'm really just having the time of my life.
Yeah, awesome. Love the story, and I love the different elements. I've got a sport background as well. I know there's a lot of growth and transformation that happens there, right? And that's sort of the first part of it, right? Of your life, depending on when you get into it, and then ideally we continue that journey, right, as we go through. And I think it's a great topic that we're going to be talking about today around that transformational side. And I know it all starts with us, right? Like you were saying, the individual transformational side. So do you want to talk maybe a bit about yourself? Like, was there something in you where you were going, okay, I found there is this moment where I had to shift something in myself, which allowed, more growth, forward from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened, hundreds of times in my life in different ways, personally, socially, professionally, relationship wise. There's a story I tell in the book. I won't spoil it, so I'll just say that there is a moment back in 2019 where I realized as a recipient of these kinds of strategies around change that I looked around this room and just realized no one here is changing, right? No one here is paying attention. If they are, they're not fully embracing the moment. They're not struggling. They're not feeling the stress of this experience. And so, I've had so many of those moments that it really crystallized for me that there needs to be a different way. That being said, in the world of entrepreneurialism, this happens multiple times a day, right? We have a project that we think is going to go forward and then it doesn't, and you have to reevaluate why that happened. You get a small win and you build momentum off that and try to turn it into the next thing and build confidence from there. Every day is packed with little micro moments of change and opportunity for growth. And for me, those lessons are really important, and they're things I talk about in the book. And maybe just to highlight a few of those, sort of strategies in action for us. The first thing is back to the sport analogy. I call it watching the tape, right? Every time you make a mistake in life or you have a regret or something doesn't go your way, just like a game that you lose to another opponent, you have to go back and watch the game, right? You have to evaluate, what could I have done differently? Where did I make bad assumptions? Where did I make bad choices? Where did I make bad decisions? How could I have done better? And that in the neuroscience of learning, mistakes are some of the biggest opportunities for the opportunity for neuroplasticity. And what that means is you only learn if you pay attention to the mistake that you just made, right? And so for me, these little micro shifts are just really, really important opportunities to adjust. And that's what change is, right? Change is adaptation. It's the idea that a behavior that I was using in the past no longer serves me, and I have to adjust that. I had so many things to learn as an entrepreneur that it's about experimentation, right? And embracing the stress of being uncomfortable in not knowing the answer, right? And so for me, I really just soak up these moments. They're small and medium in some ways, and they're big in other ways. And so that's the experience of change. And for people that read the book, we can learn to love that experience. We can learn to direct that experience. And that's my hope for people that read it.
Yeah, love it. Amazing points there. Because I think, the mindset side is very interesting, right? I love talking about this because a lot of people, they've got these beliefs growing up, a lot of them from their parents, right? And, it's just become part of them. But then, those are not necessarily serving us, right? As we're wanting to change and grow as we go over time. And and this may come also down to habits and things like that, right? That we do that allow help us. So I love to know from your side around, yeah, that mindset and habit side, like what's important there for us to be able to move forward,
Yep.
and what should we be adopting, I guess, to to change.
Yeah. So there's two things in the book that I will call out from a mindset perspective. One of them we know a lot about. Growth mindset is a phrase that a lot of people know, uh, kind of pioneered by Carol Dweck, one of the foremost researchers on this topic. There's another one that's tied to it that's really important, which is called a stress is enhancing mindset. And what that means is the idea that this may not feel good, but it's good for me, right? And we all know these experiences. The easiest are exercise or intense bouts of physical activity. They don't feel good, but we know that there are positive benefits from that. And so it turns out there's a region of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which actually gets bigger when you do hard things. And so one of the reasons I wrote this book actually is to kind of give people an understanding of what's happening inside them when they do these things, because I think that it depersonalizes some of the struggle that we feel. And the fundamental truth is struggle is good for you, right? The growth is in the struggle. And so when you combine a growth mindset with this idea of a stress is enhancing mindset, and there's peer-reviewed research in the book that people can read about this, is your performance index goes through the roof, right? Because what it really does is it enables you to withstand mistakes and setbacks and errors. And it sort of allows you to adjust from those. So for me, I think of every setback as an opportunity to learn. I don't necessarily take it as a character judgment or somehow some sort of a commentary on my ability, right? The only commentary is if you don't try again, right? And there's real truth to that. Um, the second part around mindset is really important, is this idea of effort. And one of the things I talk about in the book is how to rebuild and redefine your goals. We tend to design goals that are actually pretty demotivating for us, for all sorts of reasons that we can get into if you'd like. But one of the things you've got to do around mindset is start to enjoy the effort that you deliver in pursuit of your goals more than the goal itself, right? And so the idea that when you're chasing things and when you're delivering effort, that actually is far more motivating than when you get the thing that you want. And so this mindset shift for me is, am I delivering the maximum amount of effort that I can in the pursuit of the thing that I care about, whatever that may be? And I tell my athletes all the time, the only two things you can control in life are your attitude and your effort. And, attitude is mindset and my beliefs and how I'm willing to show up. And effort is literally the physical, emotional effort I put into chasing the thing that I'm trying to do.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. So powerful with the mindset side. It's really, really cool. So, you mentioned there around, because I think this is important because some people they like to stay comfortable, right? Like I was having this conversation just yesterday where when I play sports, I'm very competitive, right? So I want to play competitively. It's like I have a switch. I don't want to necessarily go and play friendly or play with someone. No offense to them, but maybe doesn't have as much skill, and it's not going to be a challenge for me because it feels like I'm not pushing myself and growing right to that little point there. So it's sort of like a switch that comes onto me. So it's like putting myself into those situations and finding people that are also on that same path, right? So not getting into those uncomfortable, getting into those areas. So what are your thoughts if people are thinking like this and how to get into those situations as well?
Yeah. One of the strategies in the book, there's six of them, is this concept called embracing stress. And I say this to people all the time: you will not grow unless you rebuild your relationship with stress. You have to enjoy the process of struggling, being uncomfortable, being nervous, being anxious, being afraid, because on the other side of that experience is a version of you that you haven't yet met, but can't wait to get to know. And so my beliefs around this, and the science proves it, is really a couple things. Number one, anything that you do that you don't want to do is subjectively beneficial for you. So let's say you don't want to do 5 push-ups and you say, I don't want to do this, and I go do it. That is actually neurologically beneficial to you, right? It's a hard thing that you don't want to do and you do it anyway. That's a repetition at doing hard things. Now, the goal is to become progressively more substantial in what you pick as a hard thing. 5 push-ups for somebody else may not seem like a big deal, right? And so the nice thing about difficult situations is they're subjective. And so we all have a different calibration. Yours might be an incredibly competitive moment, right? I'm much like you, right? I like to compete. I like that experience. But for other people, it might be a difficult conversation, right? It might be public speaking. Being on video like this might be scary for someone. Anytime you can fight through that experience, you're training your body with the skill of change. And that's just really, really important. The second part that's really important about this is what I call self-inducing stress, right? There's stress that happens to me because it's the world around me changing that I don't control. But then there's the stress that I choose. And it turns out that when we choose those things, number one, we experience them less intensely because I chose to be there, right? There's the cold plunge craze. I do a cold shower every morning. It's pretty cold. It never gets better, but because I choose that experience, right, I experience it differently, right? Because I know that it's doing something for me. So the more that I can pick the hard things that I do, the more empowered I am to pick progressively more difficult things to go do. And so those two parts are really important in this idea of struggle and growth.
Yeah, I love that. And I also do cold showers every morning, for that reason. And for everyone here, you can do it at the end of the shower. You can have your normal shower first and then do it at the end. That's what I do.
See, I just do it. I just jump
Really?
right in. Yeah, no, the whole thing. So soap, shampoo, the whole thing. Yeah, it's awful.
Nice. Well, hats off to you. I haven't got to that stage yet, but you're definitely in the top echelon of people doing that, which is amazing. You know, I love what you're saying there. And I think what I've seen in people as well with change is that because there's a commitment element of things, but it's also, staying there for the long haul. Like someone could change maybe for a period of time, but they could sometimes revert back, right? You know what I mean? To what they're doing as well. So I'd love to know your thoughts about that side of things and how we could, sustain that, over time as well. Like what's included in that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the thing about stress, which is so interesting, and we see this in the professional world quite a bit, um, that in times of stress, we default to our base behaviors, right? And so when people are upset or anxious or frustrated, right, we tend to fall back down. James Clear said this really, really well in his book Atomic Habits. We fall back to our systems, right? Our level of base interaction. And so what's hard about change is you have this accordion experience where if I'm getting enough sleep and I've got the right, kind of mental preparation and I'm having a good day, I can step into those new behaviors a lot more easily than if I'm struggling for whatever reason, right? And so first of all, it's important to acknowledge that is normal. That is the experience, and you're going to have that for quite some time. So it's important to give yourself grace and to have people around you that can help you pull up in those moments where maybe you're kind of falling down in the way that you want to show up. The second thing that's important to remember, it's not just normal, that it's necessary, right? Like that experience has to happen because when I fall back to those base behaviors, what's happening is I am teetering in the balance between habit and change, right? And the only way to do that is if my awareness comes back to the moment, right? I have to know in the moment that I'm failing at what I'm trying to accomplish. Because the trick about adult learning, and this is one of the things that I talk about in the book, is I don't just learn like I did as a baby, right? We have little babies, right? Mine's about a year old, yours is about halfway. They learn through an experience of just immersion in new environments, right? And we as adults don't learn that way. We have to learn through focused attention, attentional control, which is I have to pay attention to what's happening. And then I have to repeat those behaviors over and over and over again, much longer than I would otherwise want to. And so if I can't draw my awareness back to the moment where I'm failing, then I've missed the opportunity to grow, right? So it's sort of like this idea of like, I want you to struggle. I have a client right now. They're a wonderful client. We've been trying to change their culture because they had some real toxic personalities. They had some leadership issues, and it was affecting performance. And of all things, they asked me to come in and do a process like re-engineering project. And I was like, you don't have a process problem. You have a people problem, right? I could design you a new process. You'd break it in 48 hours because you don't trust each other. And so we go through this process and they've made a lot of improvement. We've identified some core cultural tenets. We've sort of rebuilt some relationships. There's some people that have moved on, some new people that have come in, but they're in that phase right now where they're starting to slide backwards. It's just not in their face every day. Things are going okay. Maybe they have a bad meeting, a bad interaction, but we're at the place where we have to go, hey, I have to remind you, we've got to reset, right? And that process of resetting every day, it's a repetitive, boring, attention, challenged moment of like, how are we opening every meeting? How am I starting every conversation? Am I bringing the right energy? Am I self-declaring when I'm not in a good space, right? So this process of vacillating back and forth, it's normal and it's necessary.
Yeah, so amazing points there, and yeah, voicing that and putting your best foot forward, like you said, where you can, and working through those better baselines and behaviors. From there, I know you talk a lot about organizational transformation as you were talking a bit about there, where you work with organizations. I guess it's interesting because change. A lot of people like to stay comfortable, right? So
Yeah.
I guess how does it work? Because you've got to get buy-in, right, from people
Yeah.
when you go in there, from obviously not just the top, but everyone in that organization. So how do you, I guess, inspire that for people wanting to change?
Yeah, it's every organization's a little different. I think there's some things that are important to acknowledge, right? Um, the first one is that we just talked about it, right? That companies form cultures and they form base behaviors, whether they label it or not, right? I always say this, that your culture will define itself whether you're intentional about it or not, right? We will just naturally form patterns of behaviors with other people through repetition, trial and error, experimentation. Some of those behaviors could be really productive. Some of them could be counterproductive. And every strength is a weakness in the right circumstance, right? So the first thing you've got to do is really help an organization and its leadership identify those patterns. Because so many of them, just like us, right? We don't always have an awareness of maybe how something we're doing is creating unintended consequences somewhere else, right? And now with groups, that gets even harder. So the first thing is to do is to say, these are your patterns. These are your established patterns. These are good. These are maybe in the middle. These are not so good, right? And so the second part of that process is, while it's good to have a coach come in and help, or a consultant come in, a third party come in and guide that process, because it can help depersonalize some of that, and that's an important thing to understand, right? When you're talking about a culture, it's a reflection of the leadership, right? Sometimes those are hard messages, but you want the team to make those reflections on their own, right? We know that we own what we create. And so if I arrive at the conclusions that these sets of behaviors are not productive for me, I will be far more willing to go change them than if I just tell you to go fix something, right? And so that's the second piece of this equation is, number one, we've got to identify the patterns. Number two, I need to involve you in that process, because I need you to go through a journey of self-reflection and then self-realization and then self-acceptance. And I say this, I had another client a couple of years ago, that this principle that I use, which is, I need everyone on the team to take individual responsibility for our collective reality. It's this idea that I helped contribute to what's happening to us now. And if I can get people to attach to that, then I'm owning up to the idea that now I have a responsibility to create a solution, as opposed to, well, we're in this mess because Ethan did it, right? And that's not a good place to be, right? That's a finger pointing situation. So that's the third thing is I need to get people to accept that they're part of it. And then after that, you've got to create an environment where they can repeat those actions long enough to stick, right? Because what do we see? We see this in companies, we see it in relationships, right? There's some kind of crisis. And for a short while, there's a high attentional focus on fixing things. And then over time, we sort of slide back to the pattern, right? That accordion experience. And then it just becomes the way we always were acting. And so you've got to have systems, processes, mechanisms, coaches to help people remind them that they're going through this experience, right? Because there's a truth, which is it'll always take you longer to change than you want. Always. It will always take you longer to change than you want, right? It took you years in some cases to get into this situation. It's not going to take a weekend or a workshop to get out of it. And so that's part of the process. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, you mentioned buy-in, and this is going to sound counterintuitive. I actually don't care if you are bought into the process. I just want you to participate. Because if you can participate long enough, the repetitions will come. And even better, if you're a little bit agitated and frustrated and pushing against it, what that means is you're challenging the situation that you're in, and hopefully I can turn that around and help you start challenging your own beliefs. Like, why are you struggling? Why are you so upset? All those sorts of things. So that would be the last piece. Is I always tell my clients, I'm going to Jedi mind trick you more than once, and you're probably going to be really upset with me at different points in this process. That's okay. Just keep going.
Yeah, nice. Love all those amazing points that you shared there. Um, Now, let's just say people are going, "Oh, this sounds amazing." Of what Michael's sharing with us. How do we know when we need to change? When the culture, I guess, needs transformation, right? In that sort of
Yeah.
sense, like when do we bring someone like you in, to the business?
Oh God, there's so many circumstances under which that would be the case. A lot of times it's because there's some other operational change happening in the business. That's what most people anchor on, right? I'm going to put in a new, you know, ERP system, or I just bought another company and we're trying to integrate, or I'm launching a new product, or we laid off, a couple thousand people and we have to figure out how to rebuild the business, or, whatever it is. There's usually an operational reason why at least big companies tend to pick up the phone and call, which is interesting, right? Because what then ends up happening is they say, well, I want you to help me fix the process, but I don't, I don't want to do a lot of change management, or maybe I need some change management. And it's like, this whole experience is a change experience, right? You've got to get down lower into the organization. And so a lot of times we struggle with that acknowledgement. I don't want this to be hard. I've heard that so many times. I want it to be easy. And I was like, if it was going to be easy, you would have done it a long time before picking up the phone and calling me. So, we have that debate a lot. But I think there's a lot of circumstances under which there's more sort of subtle cues, right? Um, Certainly degradation of performance is rarely just a process problem. I talked about that with my client. You hear things about, you see high attrition rates, people starting to leave in droves. Maybe you have a department where people are struggling, they're leaving, they're wanting transfers. You have a leader that just can't seem to kind of get it right in terms of their relationships. You're experiencing friction interpersonally that's resulting in maybe other HR experiences that are coming up. And so, those are the times when I think there's signals in the culture that relationship wise, we have points of friction that need to be addressed, right? And so there's natural points in the life cycle of a company where we see more of these things, but it takes a savvy leader to look around and pay attention to the people, and then say, okay, what are my options here, right? How do I start to rebuild from the inside out? And we were talking about this before we went on air, that a lot of times it's the people that kind of need to change that maybe don't realize it, and so they need a little help from the outside as well, right? And so that's, I think, something that is so person and company specific. I hear these cues when I talk to people, and then it's about helping them get to the realization that, hey, maybe maybe they need someone to come in and help.
Yeah, awesome. Love that. I just want to delve a little bit deeper on one of those points because obviously this is the business growth show. And one thing to grow a business is like M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And you talked about that, right? Like acquiring a
Yeah.
company. And if you do that, or multiple companies potentially, right, that all have different cultures, it's going to be like, okay, we now need to assimilate people, right, into the way we
Yeah.
do things there. From your experience, like, sometimes you don't want to change too much straight away when you do something like that, but you want to do it gradually or whatever like that. What are your thoughts around having, that to be like a smooth and as possible, process to get everybody on
Yeah.
board?
Yeah, you used the word assimilate. I've heard that a lot. I have an aversion to that word, and I know you just used it as as an example, because I think, again, go back to this idea that we own what we create, right? And think about the people in the company that are being purchased, and they're now part of a bigger enterprise, right? All of a sudden, I've been uprooted on some level, and I'm part of something bigger. I don't have any affiliation to them. I don't have any relationship to them. They're just this thing that sits above me or to the left or the right in the organization. And so that's one scenario where I feel like I'm being absorbed, right? there's other scenarios where maybe it's more peer to peer, right? Maybe we've decided to join forces and I have a little bit more say in what we're about to become, right? I actually have a client right now that they're a big healthcare services company. They do they you know they do the food, they do cleaning up the hospital rooms and some of that stuff. And they've purchased companies over the years into a big enterprise. And we built for them their first ever set of enterprise corporate values. They had never had them before because they just had all these little companies. And we went through a process of talking to those individual companies and said, who are you? What do you do? How do you treat each other? How do you show up for patients and your residents? They do some senior care living and things like that. And in the process of doing that, what we found was this set of common values, a kind of common denominator. And rather than say everyone be like this group, we said we all share these three or four fundamental attributes. Maybe we use different words, maybe we use different phrases. They show up a little differently, but at its core, right? We're about people first, right? And that's a big principle for us that we care about. And so going through that process, what it does is it gives people a sense of attachment, that there are things about my culture that are valued in other places, and we're just finding common ground. And now from that common ground, I have the ability to move forward together. If you do it in other ways, what it feels like is winners and losers. And the minute you are on the losing side of that equation, my motivation goes down, my engagement goes down, and most importantly, then my performance goes down, right? So every company's different, but the scenario will tell us a little bit about how do we help people feel a sense of attachment and affiliation to the new thing and give them a voice in that process.
Yeah, awesome. Love all that. And I know you've obviously released your new book, Change, which is right next to you there for those watching on the camera, which is amazing. So I know you've shared some great examples throughout the podcast today from that book, but just tell us overall, right? Like, what's this book about? What can we get, from reading? Yeah.
Yeah, I started writing this book actually about organizations and telling these stories that many of them we've just shared. And I realized I needed to take a step back and talk about individuals, right? Because as we started this conversation, change is about the individual, right? There is a fundamental, immutable truth to human life, which is the only person you can change is yourself. That is forever true. It will always forever be true. And so what I wanted to give people was an understanding of the formula. And what's unique is that everybody's formula is a little bit different. So, inside of this book are 6 science-backed strategies that help you understand, how do I build my own custom formula for change? Maybe I need to dial up shifts in my environment a little bit more than how I focus on the thing I want to go learn. Or maybe I need to do a little bit more around how I build and redesign my goals instead of thinking about embracing stress. I'm pretty good at stress, but I'm just not good at building the goals that I know drive motivation. And so I say this a lot. I say it in the book that, there's a formula for change, but change is not formulaic. So the first part of the book is really about the science of our brains and bodies and giving people a real understanding and a language for what's happening inside us when we try these things. The second part of the book is those 6 strategies, and we dive deep into the research and a lot of the tools that are available because I want to give people actionable strategies that they can apply in their life. And then the third part is really kind of a 4-phased approach. I don't like the word process, and I call it phases. I tend to work in phases, right? How do I assemble this into something that allows me to start building the skill of change? And that's what, at the end of the day, the book is really about. Change is a skill. It's a skill that can be learned, and it's a skill that can be progressively applied to just about anything in your life, short of changing your DNA, which is possible from what I understand, but that's not my, I'm not in that business. Short of changing your DNA, you can change just about anything about your how your behavior shows up, and that's what I hope people can take away from the book.
Yeah, amazing. Sounds extremely transformational because we all need to change and grow, right, over time to achieve the goals or where we want to go to be, like you said, whether it's individually or within a business. So yeah, it sounds really powerful. And I guess yeah, you shared so much value with us, here today, Michael. And as we're starting to wrap up here today, what one key piece of advice would you like to share with all the entrepreneurs watching and listening today?
Uh, you know, um, Change isn't just possible, it's necessary. And I hope that everyone here learns something new the day before they close the casket. You have the ability to change for your entire life. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently. And the entrepreneurial journey, the leadership journey, the human journey, the parental journey, all of those are journeys of change in different ways, and it is part of the beautiful experience of life. And do hard things and enjoy the process of doing hard things. And I am just super grateful that I've had the chance to share these messages with folks, and I try to live by those principles. And when I face a setback, I remind myself that it's about getting back up and trying again. And so I just hope people will embrace the concepts in the book, that they'll embrace the journey, and that they'll embrace the mistakes and the effort and the fear and the anxiety and the stress and all of those beautiful things that are designed to get you to move. And life is about moving. It's about moving forward. So yeah, I would just leave everyone with that.
Yeah, love it. Completely agree. So true. And yeah, we connected through our networks. I learned about your awesome journey from working at various places like KPMG, EY, and Profit Brand Strategy to now being a transformation strategist and consultant. You're an awesome guy. So knowledgeable. You shared so much, gold here today on how to change, which is for the better of us. And your book sounds amazing as well. There, I recommend, everybody to check that out. I'll be getting myself a copy too, and I'm sure you continue to create brave, will change and design innovative change strategies. Very grateful that we connected. Look forward to partnering as well. So, Michael, how can people find you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, my website is a good place to start. michaeljlopez.coach. I'm sure you'll include that in the captions. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I happen to be a LinkedIn top voice as well, which I'm super proud of. And it's just something that I really lean into. And from that, I've created a kind of a LinkedIn Live podcast series called Top Voice Tuesday that I host on my YouTube channel, Michael J. Lopez 9. And I've enjoying that. Every week I talk to another top voice and we cover a range of business issues beyond change. I bring my change perspective, but today we talked about healthcare and healthcare equity. And, 2 weeks ago we talked about brand and brand strategy. So, it's really a great, so I would love for folks to subscribe to that. And I do a newsletter every week where people can take insights from those conversations in my book. And so really do enjoy that. People can find that on my website. I'm pretty active on Instagram, and all my socials are there on my website as well, so people can follow me there.
Awesome. We'll definitely check out Michael on the website, the LinkedIn Live series, the YouTube, all the social media channels. So much gold there, the book, of course, as well. And yeah, it's been a pleasure interviewing you, mate. And thanks for being on the Business Growth Show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Business Growth Show, where we talk about everything on business growth. And please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Ethan Cassiotis, or visit my website, ethancassiotis.com. And if you want to grow and scale your business, you'd reach out to me on any platform to see if we're a good fit. So until next time, remember that our business grows where we learn skills and take action using them in spite of fear. So let's create wealth and freedom together.